You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 20th of January 2026 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, coming to you live from the World Economic Forum here at Davos. I'm Carlotta Rebello. Coming up on today's program.
The foundation of moving forward has to build on cooperation and dialogue. It is the only way to identify shared interests and chart pathways forward together.
A spirit of dialogue is the official theme for this year's World Economic Forum annual meeting. But what are the real discussions happening on and off the promenade? Our team brings us the latest. Also ahead, we speak with a consultant on what makes a strong passport, hear how to create better cities, and what are some of the trends set to redefine the way we work in 2026. Plus, our fashion desk reflects on the life and legacy of fashion designer Valentino.
One secret of this timelessness is that he was working mainly with black and white and his third color, red.
All that right here on The Briefing with me, Carlotta Rebello, live from Davos. So welcome to a special edition of The Briefing live from Davos. We are broadcasting from here all week in what's set to be a record-breaking edition of the World Economic Forum's annual meeting on all levels. Over 3,000 registered participants, some 400 political leaders, including reportedly 65 heads of state and more than 800 chief executives from the world's leading companies. So this is by far a quiet week for the snowy Swiss town, and I'm glad to say I'm joined now in the studio by Monocle's contributing editor, Jessica Bridger. Hello, Jessica.
Hi, Carlotta.
Well, you're a regular WEF attendee, and I think we've been to the same number of editions by now, but there's something that just feels quite different about this one, isn't it?
The atmosphere at this one is quite different, and we're actually seeing a lot of last-minute changes. So as you said, it's one of the strongest turnouts, and one of that is the 65 heads of state, which Larry Fink, the WEF co-chair, said represent 40% of the world's population, but we're still having changes. For example, Zelensky is possibly in or out, we don't know, and Norwegian Prime Minister Støre will attend following his text message brouhaha with Trump, and Secretary General of the UN Guterres has canceled due to a severe cold.
Well, and this follows from last night's news of Putin's special envoy now attending and the Iran foreign minister being out. So this guest list will be changing until the end of the week, it seems.
Yeah, we've had a lot of shifts. And as far as atmosphere, we're also seeing, following this idea that this WEF is about dialogue and this WEF is about collaboration and exchange, which is something that's been common in all of the WEFs we've seen so far. We are also seeing a movement that's maybe more towards something we should term debate, and the idea that what if we have panels where people disagree? What if we acknowledge the uncomfortable parts of the failures of what WEF has tried to support? And how do we make a better world given that we are in a situation that Björg Brende compared to 1945 in the current era?
Well, you hinted there at, I guess, the official narrative that we're seeing in this edition, which is this theme of spirit of dialogue that keeps popping up back again. But we know that the real conversations don't necessarily revolve around what's being discussed in the program at the Congress Center. What do you think is, the key themes and topics at the heart of the conversations that people are having, both outside and inside the Congress Hall?
I think that as we're at, Tuesday midday, so we're really at the beginning of WEF, what I'm seeing, and I think what all of us in the studio, as we've discussed what we've been running around and seen so far, is that we have a lot of movement about how do we deal with the really difficult issues that we're now facing, and how do we openly acknowledge them, whether that's on the part of civil society, governance, or business.
Well, you spoke of movements there, and I'm sure listeners can pick up on the helicopter just flying behind us, because some of those key arrivals are indeed happening throughout the day. We know the day started with the official speeches from the WEF leadership, and then also we heard from Ursula von der Leyen. But Emmanuel Macron is one of the ones set to speak this afternoon, which in the current context, as you were hinted there, will be quite an oversubscribed session, I'd gather.
Yes, we're having all these kind of moments of private exchange between world leaders that are then slated to speak at WEF. So I would say that the atmosphere and the interest in these speeches that are to come is only getting keener and only heightening as time goes on. So I would say this WEF has kind of a frenzied interest about it.
Well, we set off quite early together this morning to separate events, but it was still pitch black when we left the house. And you've been at the launch of the Edelman Trust Barometer. Tell us about, that session and that event, and what were some of the key findings?
So the Edelman Trust Barometer has been going about 25 years, and this year 33,000 people were surveyed about their level of trust in business, media, government, and NGOs. And this year, the theme of the barometer is trust amid insularity, because what was found is business is the most trusted of those institutions, but people really are trusting people who they feel and organizations who they feel have the same values, same viewpoints as them. People are becoming internal. They are getting insular. They're not looking outside of what they know, but they're looking to reinforce what they already know.
And how do you feel that that's going to then extend throughout the week, those themes?
So those themes, I think, will be reflected in a lot of the dialogue that we end up having about how do you take that shared responsibility if business, and WEF is a business-heavy gathering, right? We have 850 CEOs, we have civil society, we have startups, we have innovative organizations here. How do you take that responsibility and respond to the fact that people have become insular, people only want to learn from those like them? And what's interesting is Richard Edelman, who's the head of Edelman, said that we have a responsibility as business to do trust brokering. And I say we because I think media is also included. How do you create an atmosphere where different opinions, different value systems are welcome enough that you can draw people in who might not share values, who might not even have the same interests in what the dialogue is about, and begin to debate that and make that generative and inclusive?
Well, it goes back to your earlier point about perhaps it's time to reshape the way some conversations are had. And it is good to have people who disagree together and actually promoting dialogue in that way. Now, we know that everyone is bracing for the arrival of US President Donald Trump tomorrow morning. His speech is scheduled for lunchtime, and several of the houses have almost what I would describe as viewing parties for the speech. He's the only leader that I've spotted where several houses have that. Some houses might have for their own leaders, but seems to be across the board. What have you been hearing from people that you've been speaking to? You've been to some events already. Is everyone basically just waiting for tomorrow?
They, in some ways, are. I was at a dinner last night, and a comment was made by someone saying that they had heard a rumor that Trump was going to come out and be more moderate than people expected. But if you remember, when Trump was elected in 2020, that was the rumor on the street. And when he took office his first term, that was not what happened. So I think expecting anything of Trump is going to be a loser's game. You could make a bet on it, and I think you can monetize those, and I'm sure there are people who are involved in that market here present in Davos this year. But I would bet on we don't know what's going to happen until it happens, so we just have to go to one of those viewing parties and find out.
Well, speaking of heading to some of the viewing parties and heading to the promenade, WEF is just getting started. What's ahead for you? Where are you focusing? Are there any particular, discussions you're looking forward to as the week unfolds?
So I love the spirit of dialogue. I like to get into debate, but what I really want to see is where is action happening? So I'm going to be following some of the big systems. So whether that's AI, energy and infrastructure, climate impact and analysis, I'm going to look at the big problems and what are the big systems. So I am literally going to run across town after the end of this show and go to a panel which is about fusion at the USA House.
Well, the USA House, I was there this morning. It's quite an incredible venue. So I look forward to hearing how that session goes. That was, of course, Monocle's Jessica Bridger there joining us here in Davos. Now, let's cross over to Studio One back in London, where Monocle's Anita Riotta is ready with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Carlotta. President Trump has threatened to impose a 200% tariff on French wines, including champagne, if President Emmanuel Macron continues to refuse to join the White House's proposed Board of Peace. France Agriculture Minister Annie Genevard responded, slamming the threat as a form of blackmail. Japan welcomed a record 42 million tourists in 2025, prompting the country's tourism minister to say that Tokyo remains on track to hit 60 million annual visitors by 2030. Arrivals from China, however, dropped sharply as diplomatic tensions between Beijing and Tokyo continue. And finally, Mexico City studio Lanza Atelier will be the architect for the Serpentine Pavilion in 2026. The London Cultural Institution will celebrate its 25th anniversary this year, so we are expecting a very special edition. Those are today's headlines from Midori House. Back to you, Carlotta.
Thanks, Anita. Now, what makes a strong passport? Traveling between nations without restrictions is something that not everyone can do, so having the right citizenship can help unlock doors for both businesses and individuals. Marco Peck is the managing partner at Peck and Nash Simben Global, a global advisory firm that helps individuals explore citizenship options around the world. Marco, it's great to see you here in the studio. Tell me, what is the one thing that people get the most wrong about citizenship via investment?
Well, I would say that citizenship by investment is appealing to a broad group of people for a variety of different reasons. Historically, people that were interested in citizenship by investment were people from the global south who just wanted a passport, an additional passport for traveling around the world, let's say to Europe without a visa more easily. But today, citizenship by investment is increasingly attractive also to Europeans and Americans, Westerners in general, for access and exposure to the global south. So, for example, the citizenship by investment program of Sao Tome and Principe or Sierra Leone, these unlock a lot of countries in the global south that are of great interest. So, for example, if you become Sierra Leonean, you have not only visa-free travel to the whole ECOWAS bloc of West Africa, which for many of those countries, Europeans and Americans would need a visa, very difficult visas to attain, actually. But you can also have right of residence in those countries. It's a free movement bloc. And with the passport of Sao Tome and Principe, which is a member of the CPLP, the Association of Portuguese-Speaking Countries, you have the option to get residency quite easily in Brazil and Portugal. And you can also naturalize in Brazil after 1 year of being a resident. So this is quite unique.
Now, one of the first things I asked you before we started recording was that in my own home country of Portugal, there was a lot of controversy about how people were acquiring citizenship. And you corrected me quite quickly saying it wasn't citizenship, it was residency. And actually, that was a misleading thing that some advisors were saying it's a guaranteed and a pathway towards citizenship. And that wasn't the case. Do you see a lot of that, not just with Portugal, but with other nations, of perhaps people promising a bit much more than what actually can be delivered?
Yeah, there is a bit of that. That typically is in cases where an advisor is advising someone from, let's say, India or China, a country in the global south, a client who's interested only in citizenship for the purpose of travel or eventually gaining citizenship in another country by naturalization. The case of Portugal, that was a residency by investment program. And I think that some advisors told their clients that after you become a resident of Portugal, that you have a guaranteed path to naturalization. But the reality is that the laws that govern residency and citizenship are completely separate. And if you are living in a country as a legal resident and you have the desire to naturalize one day, you must accept that the laws governing naturalization can always change in the future. So simply being a resident is never a guarantee of later being able to naturalize.
And that applies to a lot of places.
That applies to any country in the world.
I want to take a look at, at your work. Where are you seeing, I guess, a bigger interest, which you mentioned regions there, but are there particular nations on both sides that people are looking towards to acquire citizenship, and which passport holders, where are they looking at?
The biggest trend in the last few years is that Americans and Europeans, North Americans and Europeans, also including Canadians, are the biggest demographic now in investment migration. They're the ones that are seeking out a second citizenship, second residency, or third or fourth. Of those, the largest group is Americans. So that's where the biggest demand is. And this is a huge change from just a few years ago when it was typically people from the global south who were interested in second citizenship or residency.
What do you think has prompted that change?
I would say it's general uncertainty and insecurity in the West ever since the war in Ukraine, the various things that have happened in the US in the last few years. All of this has led to people wanting to have the security of another citizenship, another residency, but particularly citizenship in the global South, because it's quite different. And what I always tell people is that just the same way that you want to have a balanced investment portfolio, you want to be exposed to different stocks in different industries, ideally different geopolitical environments, different countries. Similarly, you want to have a diversified citizenship portfolio. You ideally, should have the right to live and work in different places that are not likely to be involved in, a conflict at the same time or be exposed to difficulties at the same time.
Would you say that, I guess in the future, it will become as much of a requirement for, CEOs and entrepreneurs to have a varied citizenship portfolio as it is to have, an understanding of the stock market?
Absolutely. I think in the years to come, it will become increasingly commonplace to have multiple citizenships. And certainly among a globally mobile person, it will become the norm.
I have a few more, I guess, not quick fire questions, but, in just you answer me in a few words each. But, if I was a client coming to you and I said, I'm looking at a country in the global South, what's the first country that comes to mind?
Well, I would say the one that I would first suggest would be Sao Tome and Principe, because it opens several doors. It not only allows you to have a passport from the global South, but it also gives you the option to access two very desirable, interesting countries, Brazil and Portugal, via a unique path. It's an uncorrelated country. It's a country that no one has any opinion about, but it's still quite connected because of the CPLP association.
Recently was in the news that Ukraine's parliament decided to change the law so that its citizens can have, I think it's more than 2 citizenships now, obviously from a list of approved countries by parliament. How do you view, not particularly this case, but in general, Germany used to be quite a strong example of that, of not allowing for dual citizenship. Are those days becoming, I guess, more numbered in terms of having nations that don't allow for that?
Yeah, so that's another common misconception that multiple citizenship is quite restricted in the world. Actually, about 75% of the world's countries allow multiple citizenship, and it is indeed multiple. So there's no country in the world that has a law that says you can only have 2 or you can only have 3. It's always either only us or as many as you want. So it is indeed the norm, and it is becoming increasingly common. It's absolutely the trend that from that remaining 25% or so of countries that don't allow multiple citizenship, you've had in the last few years countries like Germany that have decided to allow it.
Now, you, with your work, are someone that probably is very familiar with different passports. Do you have a favorite passport design?
I love passport design. I love to look at passports. I would say it's very hard to choose, but I would say the Finnish, the Swiss, the Norwegian, and actually the Sao Tome passports are very nicely designed. They're not typical designs. I like designs that are off-center, that are not the typical, central design where you have a big coat of arms and something different. And those are nice designs that are a bit off the beaten track in terms of design.
Marco Peck, thank you very much for joining us. And do look out for the February issue of Monocle magazine, where Marco wrote a piece diving deeper into the world of citizenship and passports. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio, live from Davos. Stay tuned. This is The Briefing on Monocle Radio. I'm Carlotta Rebello, coming to you today from Davos. Now, this week is not just about political and business leaders making an appearance in the snowy Swiss mountains. It's also about having serious conversations with partners and clients about how to create better cities and increase quality of life in our built environment. One such firm that's engaged in these conversations here in Davos is the global real estate giant JLL. Sue Asprey-Price is the CEO of Work Dynamics at JLL, and I'm delighted to say that she joins me now in the studio. Hi, Sue. Great to have you back on Monocle Radio. I wanted to jump straight in because you have been examining the way we work and how the office can influence our lives. How can we create better offices? I'm always curious about this role that design and engineering can have in this. How does the workplace affect the way we perform and feel when we are at work?
One of the things that we are really focused on is experience and performance. And when you talk about engineering and design impacting an individual, I think we are so close to cracking the holy grail of environment impacting productivity. So many companies want to measure performance of individuals and productivity, and are they getting the most out of those individuals? And when we talk about engineering and design, we're seeing hyper-personalization of space. We're seeing that individuals need a certain environment to perform really well. We're also seeing more and more people, I know I've got a Whoop on right now and Aura rings and everything, where people are recognizing how environments and sleep and nutrition and everything are impacting their own personal performance. So when we talk about engineering of buildings, we're actually now seeing that how a building is run can impact an individual's performance. So we're now starting to see that convergence, and this is where AI is really impacting our industry to really say, okay, if I change an environment, if I change temperature, if I change green, if I put plants in an environment, does that impact people? And we now have the data to really demonstrate that it does. So individual buildings, hyper-personalization experience is really where we're seeing AI impacting individual performance.
Now, we've been talking a lot about, the buildings itself and how within them changes can be made. I wanted to kind of challenge you to take a step outside, because where these buildings are located also impacts, all of these things we've been talking about. And you were just mentioning, about the vibrancy of cities and making cities. This conversation about what makes a good neighborhood is essential. You might have the best workplace in the world, the best office, but if it's not in the correct area, if you're not giving back to the community or engaging with the community, it doesn't really matter, does it?
No, it doesn't. And dare I say it, the old adage in our world of property is location, 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 and it's never been more relevant. It used to be really focused on ease, frictionless, right? It used to be really focused on being very close to a transport hub. That is still critically important, right? When we talk about individual choice, we also know that very few people go to a work environment every day. So competing with the home or competing with an alternative work environment is one of the things that needs to be considered. Therefore, ease of access to buildings is a number one criteria. The second thing then is the combination of live, work, play. And live, work, play is not only where an office is located, but the environment within which it is housed. And that goes back to then communities, goes back to social, goes back to highly amenitized places that, we're actually seeing an increase in retail, in physical retail. So we're seeing a little bit of pushback against just online retail, and we're seeing a revival of not just food and beverage, but actual retail locations. So getting the combination right of that amenitized space, connection into communities, and also social environments is really critical.
Now, at the end of last year, we spoke to you about the workforce preference barometer that JLL published.
Yeah.
And, we are at the start of the new year. Davos and the World Economic Forum's meeting tends to be, setting the tone for what to expect in the next 12 months. Looking at your own team, at the Work Dynamics team, what are some of the things you're looking out for 2026?
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you for the question. There's kind of 6 key things that we've now heard from our research of areas of focus of just real estate and where it plays into corporate strategy. So if you don't mind, I'm going to go through all 6. So one of them is cost. Obviously, cost is still a laser focus. So heads of real estate, 70% of them say that's their number one challenge that they need to navigate. And you think about inflation and interest rate, how they navigate that, and effective deployment of capital is really key. And that is really important because, again, what we're seeing is a lot of organizations know they need to do something to improve their location or their space, but they want to ensure that the return on that capital is really effective. So gone are the days that they just kind of roll things out. They're going to be very focused on that. The second thing is that we are seeing a supply shortage, believe it or not. And that goes back to high quality office space in major cities right now, locations like Paris and London and New York. We're actually seeing a shortage of quality. Now, that's partly because of the dynamic of the cost of capital. To retrofit buildings to make them the quality that we need is expensive. So we've got this little bit of a demand and supply that actually there's a fair bit of property available, but the quality space is really a challenge. And we're seeing that across industrial assets, retail, and data centers as well. So that's a key theme that we're trying to navigate through. My favorite one, experience is the new value driver. So going back to what we're talking about around hyper-personalization, the experience that an individual has, that has a currency now, which we didn't see before. So gone are the days of standardization. And then some other ones, AI, convergence of building and power. Electrification is a key challenge in our market right now. And actually, buildings can play a big part of that. Buildings can actually generate about 25% more revenue by recognizing that they are not only a generator of power, if you think about solar power and think about opportunities, but also then they can store power. So thinking about that as part of the building ecosystem is key. And then the final one is just broadening of real estate investors. So 6 key themes that we have seen coming out of all of our surveys. Those are the top priorities. And again, I'm going to say my favorite one is experience, going back to the individual.
And Sue, just finally, I must ask you before I let you go, tell me about your office, or I guess what makes an office tick for you?
Well, for me, it's us, it's people. And, an office that offers this, different space environments for people, concentration space, focus space, collaboration space, and social space is really, really key. And then also ensuring that it's got the right amenities, the right community, the right vibrancy. And I'm probably famous most for coffee. Good coffee is critical because, for me, I love coffee. And it's amazing how food and coffee draws people together. And you see, we call it casual collisions in the office where you're meeting colleagues that you may not meet, seeing clients, seeing different environments where you're seeing people come together. So never underestimate how good coffee, good amenities, good food, bringing people together. That's a heart of what we see, not only in the consumer experience, but also in the office experience.
That was Sue Asprey-Price, the CEO of Work Dynamics at JLL. Thanks for joining us. And finally today, a defining figure in the world of fashion and haute couture, Italian fashion designer Valentino has died aged 93. Monocle's luxury markets editor Brenda Tui and Confect style director Marcella Palek reflect on his life and legacy. Marcella began by recalling the one Valentino look that has stayed with her.
Do you remember the black and white evening gown Julia Roberts was wearing 2001 when she won the Oscar for the Best Actress?
Of course I do. It was
You do.
just
Yes.
utterly beautiful as she is, but the dress, it didn't overpower her. It just enhanced her great beauty.
And it was incredible that it was not newly made by him, but it was dating back to 1982. So Valentino took it from his archives. But I think it looked so incredibly chic and glamorous.
I think I agree with you. And I suppose that is the true beauty of a Valentino gown, is that it's timeless, really.
Yeah, indeed. And I think one secret of this timelessness is that he was working mainly with black and white and his third color, red.
Red, the
Yes,
color of
this-
passion, of love.
Yes.
I mean, it's such a powerful color.
Yeah.
I think he knew that.
There was even a Pantone designation for its color. Incredible. And I think when there was a strong influence on him, then it was this performance of Carmen, which he saw with his father when he was young in Barcelona.
Yes.
And I think this red struck him and never let him go until his final big finale, haute couture collection, in January 2008, which was also striking, because imagine all the models, all of them wearing head to toe red.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
Very, very powerful. I mean, he really was such a focused and incredible character. Born in 1932 in Voghera in northern Italy, he knew exactly what he wanted to do. He opened his first atelier in 1960 in the Via Condotti in Rome, and just continued from there. You know, having worked for Jacques Fath and Balenciaga, and then I think a little bit for Guy Laroche as well, he just went full steam ahead as a young man and opened up his own atelier and really just continued on. And he knew exactly what he wanted. His partner in business and in life, Giancarlo Giametti, they met, I think, also that same year, and on they forged this incredible alliance and a brand that was one of the great titans of fashion.
Yeah, and I think with the incredible vision, because what I thought was really astonishing about Valentino, that he never cared about any trends. You know, he followed his own vision of elegance and beauty, and underlined the word beauty. I think it was his mantra, actually, by every occasion he could. So beauty was his big mantra.
Yeah, I think you're right. And that is, I suppose, why his fashion, his gowns, the dresses are so enduring and timeless, because he just did exactly what he wanted and followed, as you said, elegance and beauty. They were his muses.
That was Confect's Marcella Pollack and Monocle's Brenda Tui on the life and legacy of Valentino. And that's all for this special edition of The Briefing at the World Economic Forum in Davos. It was produced by myself and Desiree Bandley here in Davos, and our studio manager back in London was Steph Chungo. We'll be back right here at the same time, live from our pop-up radio studio in the Swiss mountains, located at the Penthouse Studio by Hub Culture off the Promenade. And do tune in to the Monocle Daily later this evening, which is coming to you from Greenland. Monocle's Andrew Muller and Alexis Self will be bringing you the latest news from Nuuk at 1800 London time, 1900 if you're listening in Davos. I'm Carlotta Rebello. Goodbye and thanks for listening.